Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. New microphone. The right way up. For those of you who are keeping pace here. Anyway, this is very viable with a little tweak, and the little tweak just takes a few seconds. It's just a matter of tipping the equalizer, reducing the bass a bit and upping the treble a bit in non-technical terms, and it's very easy to do. It will get a little more complicated with longer videos because there's separate clips and each clip will need the soundtrack adjusted. It's no big deal. So this is quite usable, and for things like this where I may be moving around, I won't be moving around much today. The laptop's in here. There's something a bit different for the Sunday chat. I'm going to talk about when we look stuff up on the internet to try and work out how to look after our species. I'm only going to do it for species. If you've got hybrids and you can find out what went into them, you can do it for each of those in turn. Logically there would be only two, but that's not always the case. I always say at the very bottom there's two species, but it really is at the bottom and you might not be able to find that out. Your interrogations might find that this species was crossed with this hybrid and you can't find out what's in that hybrid, so you've lost track, but you do what you can. So I'm sticking to species. The idea is to there are two sites that I use a lot, one a lot more than the other because it's brief and just gives a short account, and the other one I use if I'm not that happy with what I got from the first one, or it's not enough, I want more. And some orchids don't need a lot of information to actually grow them happily, but in amongst those sites are expressions that are used that relate to things in the wild, and they might need a little bit of interpretation because sometimes they're vague, but you can read a lot into a sentence sometimes when on the surface it doesn't look like they're giving you much information at all, and then when you think about it and look a bit deeper, you've got everything you need from that one sentence sometimes, depending on the site. So first of all, I'm going to remind us where we come from. So there's going to be pop-ups and they're going to totally obscure me because there's other things far more prettier than me. So this is the world where we live, in case you've forgotten, and this is what it looks like when it's flat. Some people still think it is, I believe. Mind you don't fall off the edge. Ooh. Anyway, this is the world where we live, and going across the map are lines. Well, most maps, they're there for geographical reasons to work out which bit is which. But there's two very special lines, three in fact. One goes across what is the middle, but on our representation of the world, we include a lot more at the top than we do at the bottom. So the equator isn't in the middle. It should be, but it's not. It's just the way we show the map because there's more to look at up the top. Down the bottom is just ice and snow. So we don't bother with it. We just cut it off as though it's not there. Great. Anyway, you've got the centre line, the equator, and then you've got two lines either side of that, and then some more lines up the map and down the map. There's two little soft lines in there as well, and I'll get in closer. This is the two tropics, Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn, and in between those lines is what we deem the tropics, and that's where the majority of our orchids originate, somewhere between those two lines. There's a few creep over the boundaries, but not by much relative to the size of the world we're looking at. So this reduced section is the section where most of our orchids come from. And I've deliberately chosen this map because the colour scheme on this map goes from lowland, greeny bits, to much higher areas, mountainous bits in shades of brown, yeah? And there's even a little bit of pale purple in there, that's very high up, yeah? So you can see where the high parts are. That's important, yeah? Because it goes with other things to determine certain elements of the care we might need to do. Now if you take, for example, the Southern Americas, down the left hand side is a brown bit, yeah? That's very mountainous and it's very close to the coast, so that could be important. depending on which side of the mountain some of our orchids might come from. I think that's Peru down there. Don't quote me, my geography's not too good. Top bit and bottom bit, that's about my limit. But you can see the section we're looking at. You're looking at from from Mexico down into the southern Americas. You're looking at central and southern Africa, across Madagascar, and then across parts of India, across all the islands, Thailand, Laos, all that sort of stuff, clipping the top of Australia. So that's our main area where most of our orchids are going to come from, with a few exceptions. Right. Now the next map I want to look at is what we're always worried about with our orchids is the seasons that they might encounter. And in between those two lines, the first thing you can determine is the day length isn't going to change much between 11 and 13. You know, the sun drifts off of the equator, it doesn't, the sun doesn't, the earth tips. But basically the sun is, higher in the sky to one side of the equator than the other side, and it alternates throughout the year. And the day lengths are going to be somewhere between 11 and 13 hours constantly. They don't change much because that's the only movement there is in the sun. It's more exaggerated in places like where we are in the UK. We get from 8 hours to 16 hours, so it's quite a bit of difference. Anyway, so day length is going to be pretty consistent, and in addition to that, unless it's cloudy, light levels are pretty consistent for the same reason. The sun's almost directly overhead year round, with a slight tilt. So that's the light. Right, now let's have a look at the next thing we worry about with our orchids. Rainfall. Well, this is a rainfall map. It goes from light colours, not much rain, to dark colours, lots of rain. And don't forget, this is average. Within that there could be slightly drier periods and slightly wetter periods, but nonetheless, on average, where are all the dark colours? Yep, if I squeeze the map down again, it's exactly the same place. So in the areas where most of our orchids are going to come from is where the heaviest rainfalls are. That explains a lot, doesn't it? Now let's look at the last map. This is temperatures. Hottest temperatures are up where the reds are, and lighter colours as it cools off. So again, where are the hottest areas? Straight through the middle, straight through the section where our orchids come from. Now these are averages, because at certain times of the year, that little picture of Australia down in there should be black. It's so flipping hot in the middle, not around the edges. That's why everybody lives around the edges, not in the middle. It's flipping hot there and dry. Anyway, so those are the areas of the world we're looking at. And within there, you've got heavy rainfall, sometimes for most of the year, sometimes for 5 or 6 months of the year. That does vary. You've got the warmest temperatures. Those stay roughly the same throughout the year. They don't change much. So what changes the temperatures then? Because, it says this orchid needs a cooler winter. Well, how's it going to get that then? It's higher up. So elevation will affect temperature, which is why I showed that relief map at the beginning. In amongst our areas are some pretty high areas. That makes a difference. Right, so that's just a quick look at the areas and the sort of things that affect us. Now you can get weather information at quite precise details now down in areas within countries, and you'll get average temperatures, rainfalls, all that sort of stuff, and rainfall by season, by month even. So that information's there if you want to dig, for a specific area. You can pick a town in Brazil and it will give you that information. You might have to dig a little bit, but you can get it. Now that's important where you come across, when we start looking up our species, and you come across a species that's only found in a very small restricted area. You have to ask yourself why. Why isn't that more widely found? Because you'll get another orchid is found here, 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 common as muck. Why is that one like that? And some others are very restricted to the areas they're found. And if they're in that zone of quite restricted, not found in very many places, or perhaps only one. Yeah, get in there and have a look at the weather, because that might be the reason. Now it could be type of trees that grow there. It could be the type of soil that restricts the plants. So there's variables, but weather is the main thing, quite honestly. Weather and elevation. Right, so what I'm going to do now is pick a couple of orchids at the different ends of the spectrum, and I'll use the laptop to look them up, and then just read through some of the stuff and talk about it as we go along. We'll have a look at the orchids before we start. Now I'm picking on, this is Masdevallia ignea. Now the first thing I will say is, when somebody holds up an orchid like this that's got bugs on it and the leaves are not in very good condition, and I tell you how to grow it, you shouldn't listen, because I'm not growing this very well, am I? We might find out why. Those bugs are new, by the way. They weren't there last time I looked. And there's a couple of leaf stalks down here that have got looks more like scale than mealy bugs, so I shall have to get on and deal with that. That's not a today thing though, that's a tomorrow thing when we get to watering. Right, so that's Masdevallia ignea. Now I already know that's a cool or cold grower, but I don't know much more than that. But let's dig in and have a look at that one. And the way I use the internet to find out about stuff is I just use Google search and type the name of the plant in, and a lot of the time you don't even have to type all the name in, it'll fill it in for you. That helps with spelling as well. If you spell it wrong, it'll say, didn't you mean this? So you can get the spell check while you're at it. Right, so what are we looking at then? Masdevallia ignea. See, now I've only got that far and it's already filled it in for me. So we've got Masdevallia ignea. Now the two sites I use are orchidspecies.com. So if you wanted to type that in, you type in www.orchidspecies or one word.com. But I don't go at it that way. I don't go to the site and then try and find the orchid. I type the orchid in and look for the site, because it will give you a list with that name, that's the stuff that's relevant. And orchidspecies.com will normally be high up on the list. Sometimes it's quite a way down, but a lot of the time it's high on the list. And in this case it's second on the list. So we'll pull that one up. We get a pretty picture with a slug bite taken out of it. Very clever. But this will give us a brief description, orchidspecies.com. And we'll see if there's anything in there we might need to interpret. We might even find out some things that we didn't know before. That's a relatively common Masdevallia in collections, if you can keep it cool enough. Right, it's found in a particular area of Colombia. That sentence stops there. So this is only found in one area in the world. So you have to ask yourself why. What's special about that? You might want to take a closer look at that area. It's actually Eastern Cordillera. So you could type that in and look up that. Find out where it is. Do a weather check on it. Yeah, if you wanted to go that far. So that's where it comes from, at elevations of 2,600 to 3,800 meters. Therein lies your first bit of care. From sea level and ambient temperature, as you climb 1,000 meters, you lose 6 or 7 degrees centigrade. So when you're heading up towards 4,000 meters, you've dropped quite a lot in temperature. Yeah, and this one grows quite high up. That is why it's a cool grower. It's because it grows high up. Yeah. Right, let's move on then. It says so that's the elevation, as a small sized cold growing terrestrial. Now I didn't know that. That could make me do a second take on what mine's potted in, because mine's potted in moss. Therein may be a mistake why it's not doing quite as well, apart from the fact that it's too warm in here for it. So it's a terrestrial. not sometimes terrestrial, it just says it is a terrestrial. So it's going to like its roots in something, not loads of air all round it. Yeah, point number one. And then it goes into some descriptions of the plant and the leaves and the stems using words I've never heard of. I'd need a dictionary to work out what the hell it was going on about, but I don't care about those words. I can look at a picture. I don't need all the words then, do I? So I don't bother with all that, cobblers. Until we get out the end of that section on this site, where it might give us a description about blooming. Yeah, and on here it says that it has a single flower, and that flower is on slender stalks, 12 to 15 inches long, holding the flower well above the leaves. We like that because that means the flowers are going to be upright, probably not arching, and probably not hanging down. Some Masdevallias hang down, and you've got to lift them up or hang them up there to be able to see what they even look like. Those might not be the best choice for you. Same for me. Now, if I've got a Masdevallia that hangs downwards, like the Draculas do, I've got to pick it up to have a good look at it, or hang it in the roof. That's not the best place for Masdevallias and Draculas. That's the warmest bit and the brightest bit. Yeah. So anyway, so that's and it occurs in late spring and summer. Well, that's obviously quite a long period of blooming. So we've interpreted blooms in spring and summer, late spring and summer. That gives us 3, maybe 4, possibly even 5 months blooming period. You know, some orchids bloom for 3 days and they die. So that's an important little bit of information. We've interpreted that to being a long flowering period. And I suspect that could be extended as well. Now that's all that this one says, but we've already found out we've got a long flowering period. The blooms are held above the leaves because some Masdevallia blooms come out within the leaves, so you've got a hell of a job to see them. And they could be very attractive, but if you've got to part the jungle to look at the bloom, it's not ideal, is it? And we've also found out it's a terrestrial, and it grows high up, and it comes from one place in Colombia. So that's what that site says about that orchid. Let's have a look and see what the other site says. The other site is travaldoblogspot.com. So that's travaldo.blogspot.com. I'll put those links on pop-up so that you can read them off and pause it and write them down if you need to do so. But as I said, I don't ever type them in. I just pull them off the list. And the trouble is, if you go to the site, you haven't found your orchid yet. If you find your orchid first and then pick the site out of the list, you don't need to worry about it. It goes straight there. It makes life easier. So we'll go to this Travaldo next. Unfortunately, this site is splattered all over the place with adverts. The other one may have the odd one, but not many. Right, so this one's far more wordy. It's quite elaborate, this one. It makes you feel you're getting a lot more information. Often you're not. You're getting the same information, just spread out a bit. But there are snippets on this site sometimes that the other one doesn't give you. So again, it gives you some history of when it was found, who found it, the fact that it's endemic to Colombia. The other site didn't say that, did it? But it implied it. If it says it's only found in Colombia, that means it's endemic to Colombia. So this is just elaborating in words, but it gives you more details because it says it's found in the rich humus of tall forests of the department of Notre de Santander and in the forest below Parama de... oh, I can't say that. Tells you where it comes from. Right, and then it gives you a list of all the synonyms. That's a paragraph about that deep. So it's been named many things, chopped and changed around, but its main name has been maintained throughout. That's good. It repeats itself a lot because the next section starts off with saying this is endemic to Colombia. We just said that. And then it gives the region again, who found it. Yeah, a lot of repeats going on here. Small size, cold growing terrestrial, blah blah blah, description, more commonly known as the fire red Masdevallia, and it then repeats that name more often. Blooms in late spring and summer, so it agrees with the other site. Flower well above the leaves. This is all in agreeing and repeating the information we've already found in much more longer and elaborate sentences, but it's saying the same thing. This one has got some more information about the blooms. The colours include yellow red, oranges, red and red oranges with varying degrees of pink and purple derived from the very fine hairs. So the colour's variable. So if you don't buy yours in bloom and you wanted a bright red one, you could get one that's almost yellow or pale orange. Now that, the other site didn't say that, just showed a picture. So we've got more information about the colour that we didn't have before. Right, then we get into the care section. Now this breaks it down into the normal sections. You've got light, and on this site it gives you lux values. I'm not quite sure where it's got them from, unless it's been where they grow with a light meter measuring in lux. Otherwise it's taken that data from another site. How reliable is it? Yeah, but it's a good guideline, because we didn't get any of that, did we, from the other one? So this says it likes good light but not direct light, and 17,000 to 22,000 lux, which means nothing to me. But it recommends reasonably heavy shade in summer, 70 to 90%, and 25% shade to full sun in winter. You can't make a statement like that without saying where. It's all very well saying it can take full sun in summer. Yeah? Can it take that at sea level on the equator? I think not. So watch. You need to interpret. Don't just take it. Think about it. Think and put a bit more thought into the words that have been used. Now, where this person grows, that might be a valid statement, but it might not be everywhere for people that grow in different places. So you need to go steady with statements like that. But then it does say the leaves should be on the paler side to get the right amount for blooming. If they are a dark green, it's probably not going to bloom very well because the shade's too much. Then it gives some temperature ranges, or restates cool growing. We've said that about 4 times so far. From 5 degrees to 25 degrees. So that's its like maximum dynamics. Outside of those ranges, it's going to start deteriorating, I suspect. Ideally in winter, minimum of 10 and a maximum of 13. There's a slight contradiction. You've just said it's okay between 5 and 25. Now you've said minimum 10. But don't forget, the first was its absolute maximum and minimum. That doesn't mean to say it's going to be happy at those. It would be happier in between. Yeah. Interpretation again. Temperature should not exceed 25 degrees. You're gonna die. I get up to 30 in here. That's part of why it probably isn't doing very well. Part, not all. I suspect what it's growing in and how long it's been in it is part of the problem, because chances are the roots are going. So that's how it's starting to now slowly go downhill, combined with the temperatures. Temperatures consistently around 30 degrees will weaken the plant, and in severe cases they will dump their leaves. And I've seen Masdevallias do that. They just come down in the morning, or we're halfway through the day, and you pick your plant up and it goes and all the leaves just fall off, and you're there with a pot with stalks sticking up. I've seen it happen, it does. So that's that. Humidity 75 to 80% with air circulation. Sort of take that as read, I suppose. Keep the air moving at all times to prevent water staying on the leaves. Well, if you don't get your leaves wet, you don't have to worry so much about that, do you? Growing media. They can be grown in pots or mounted. Having just said it's a terrestrial, I'm going to say it's a contradiction in terms to say it can be mounted. If it's a terrestrial, you're not going to have the right media on a mount. It's going to fall off for a start. An open basket, okay, even though it might fall out the sides. What about a basket lined with moss and then a more terrestrial mix in the middle where the majority of the roots are. That might be a good idea, because then you've got the ability for it not to say soggy, because you've got the air through the holes in the basket. Yeah, well, let's go on, see what else it says. It even gives a recommendation: a mix of 5 parts bark, I would suggest that's small bark, it doesn't say, 5 parts perlite and 1 part fibrous, not fine, peat moss. There's your terrestrial mix. They've added the peat moss in. Yeah? Now immediately you've got something more soil-like in amongst that mix. That's what mine's going in. I've got the chunky peat, so I'm going to repot mine. Their roots are small and many will fill pots very quickly when growing well. Deeper pots are generally used and plants are potted out from being divided. Oh, that's pot sizes and stuff like that. So it sounds like they like quite a deep root run where possible. That's not essential. Some plants don't like a shallow root run. All the roots will go down to the bottom and try and escape out the bottom of the pot. Blah blah blah, repotting. A nice statement there: do not bury the base of the plants. Well, some people might not think of that, you know, and a lot of it will be how you got it. So it might have been potted badly when you got it, and you naturally assume that's how it should be, and not necessarily. Yeah. So, right, watering. This Masdevallia will not tolerate dry conditions. It's a Masdevallia that goes across the board, and should be kept moist but not soggy. Their roots must be able to dry out slightly between waterings. In hot weather, they need daily watering. See, these are the sort of things that really get my goat. What if it's still soaking wet from yesterday when you watered it? Then it doesn't need watering, does it? You can't say things like water daily. Water daily if almost dry. Go steady. Ugh. Water in the morning so the leaves can be dry by midday. Well, that assumes you're pouring water all over your leaves. Well, most people don't. So, yeah, some ifs and buts on this site, but it's generally good information with a little bit of give and take. Plants should be provided with rainwater or distilled water or a very pure water source. Yes, that makes sense. Humid environment. It's better to have a humid environment than keeping the roots too wet, as they are prone to rotting. That's a nice sentence. Fertiliser. Next to nothing, I hope it says. Generally active throughout the year, although a bit slower in winter. They don't say why, do they? Why would it be slower in winter in the UK? Short day lengths. Yeah, it's not going to be the drop in temperature, is it? That's the bit where it's happy. So, you know, use a balanced fertiliser. I can't think why you'd use an unbalanced or imbalanced fertiliser. At quarter strength throughout the year. Feed every 3rd or 4th watering. I like that. If in doubt, do not feed. I like that a lot. Masdevallias really don't need much. So even when you are feeding, very, very low levels and not very often. More flushes than feed. Yeah? Keep the roots happy. Yeah, so that's that plant. The 2 different sites. Far more information on the second one, but it repeats itself a lot. And in addition to that, some of the information is a bit misleading. But if you use this as you're reading it, you can take that misleading element out by reading into it what was either meant or the fact that it might be saying something that's for specific for that grower, which you can choose then to either accept or not. Yeah, so right, that's that one. Let's have a go at some. And now for something completely different. And I'm not sitting at a desk on the edge of the sea with no clothes on. That will show your age. Right, and something completely different. Up the other end of the spectrum, and I've chosen this because there's a lot of misinformation about it. This is my Dendrobium jenkinsii, a monster. It's actually several plants all butted up together. it started out as one plant, but sections started to die back, and I thought it would look nicer if those dead bits were taken off and it was remounted a bit more uniform over the mount. So it's still got a bald patch here, but nonetheless it's a plant that grows well for me, blooms well for me, and for me is trouble free. So you're welcome to ask me how I grow that here, and you'll get a good answer. Yeah, just remember when you ask somebody about, have you got one of those? Yeah, I've got one of those. How do you grow it? Oh, I do this, this and the other. Better to precede the question with, does it do well for you? Because it's all very well them telling you how they grow it, but the plant could be half dead. In other words, what they're doing is not good. Yeah, so make sure you check those sort of things. Some people are happy to tell you what they do, but not necessarily happy to say that it's not working very well. There's a joke from years ago. Two blokes chatting in the pub, and one says, "Here, you know when you wallpapered your front lounge, you said it took 8 rolls? Yeah. And my lounge is the same as your lounge because our houses are the same? Yeah. Well, I used 8 rolls to wallpaper my lounge, and I've got 2 left over. Yeah, I had 2 left over as well." And always take what somebody says as read. They might be missing bits out. Right, let's come out of here and go and find our Dendrobium jenkinsii. Dendrobium Jenk. Yeah, I've only got as far as Jenk and it's already found it. Right, jenkinsii. Come on, get on with it. Thank you. Right. Now, this has come out with the Travaldo blogspot first, immediately followed by Orchid species. Yeah, but I'm going to do them the way round I did last time. So we'll look at Orchid species first. We've got a very good picture of the blooms with a bit of the plant showing. That's the problem with that site, is it has pretty good pictures of the blooms under virtually all circumstances, but not of the plant. Yeah. A second picture of like the whole plant might be nice. That applies to all sites. Again, little bit of information, not a lot. Effectively, we've got not much more than a sentence on this one, but let's see what it includes, because it still could be good stuff. Found in China. Oh, that's good. In China and Thailand it's called different things, so it's given the local name. Yeah. Right, it's found in the Hainan, China area, Assam, Eastern Himalayas, Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar and Laos. And I don't even think that's a complete list. I'm sure Thailand's on that list as well. In open forests on tree trunks at elevations, we get to our good bit, of 700 to 1500 meters. That's not cold. So what happened to this dry, much cooler winter rest? Yeah, well, how cold? How cool? Yeah, perhaps not so much. So when you're trying to chill this thing right down to get it to bloom, that's completely thrown me. My battery died. I think that's the first time I've ever lost the battery power on the camera while I'm using it, I mean. And I'm already on the spare battery. Now we're on the spare battery. So I better not go on too much longer. It's only a small battery, this one, not the giant one I normally use. Where did we get to? Where it came from, and we were discussing the elevation. And the fact that the elevation only mentions 1500 meters, this is used to growing in reasonable temperatures, I would say, and doesn't get chilled right down. So that's the first little bit of information we've gleaned. And then the next bit is a smaller sized, warm to cool growing epithet. The magic sentence that we want. When we're looking for an orchid and we're wondering if it's going to do okay, warm to cool growing or cool to warm growing means it will put up with almost anything. It's temperature tolerant. It may still have a magic band where it's at its happiest, but it's going to be pretty happy at most temperature ranges. That's an important sentence. Plus the word epiphyte on the end, so we've got no qualms about chucking it on a mount straight away, which I did, which I've done. And then it goes into these long elaborate words describing the shapes of the pseudobulbs. Little bit of information there, somewhat flattened pseudobulbs carrying a single terminal thick leathery leaf. Now that's quite useful, because if you've only got a small plant, yeah, and it's got like one leaf on the bulbs and a couple with no leaves on, and then you start growing some new growth and there's only one leaf and you're expecting two, you might think your plant's not doing very good at all, but then you find out it's only supposed to have one, and then you're happy. Yeah, these little snippets can help you know that you're doing okay. Blah 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 about blooms and this, that and the other. Orchid is a spring bloomer that needs a dry winter rest with full sun and is best mounted. Right, take away dry winter rest and replace with drier winter rest. Yeah. Now remember our rainfall map. Lots of rain in all of these areas, including the ones we're talking about for where this plant comes from. But it didn't show the seasonal variations between the wet season and the dry season. And in quite a lot of these places, not all, there is a distinct drier season that corresponds to a winter. It's not a true winter, yeah, but it corresponds to that. And it is drier. And in some places, it's more dry than others, but it's not bone dry. There's not 5 months with no rain. That don't happen, yeah. So there's always going to be a bit, and there'll be morning dew and some mist and things like that in the slightly cooler period. And it is cooler, but it's not cold. It's just cooler. Yeah. So we found out a bit from that. Grows best mounted to accommodate the pendant inflorescence, so that's good stuff. And then there's a bit about it's often confused with Lindleyi. I can't see how. Lindleyi is more than twice as big for a start and has 3 times as many blooms on the spikes, so shouldn't really be confused. So that's that site. Right, so let's go back and go to the Travaldo. And this is the more elaborate one, but we might pick up a few snippets about this thing. Jenkinsii is widely distributed. Well, yeah, common as muck. Range extends to the east of northwest India, including Sikkim Hills, Bhutan, Assam, and it goes through the list. Slightly different list. This one does include Thailand, yeah, and the Yunnan province in southwest China. So there's some slight differences in the list of where it comes from, but they're basically giving a band of countries. Yeah, so general, found in lots of places. Bit of information about who found it, some of its previous names, or this was once called Aggregatum Variety Jenkinsii. Well, you shoot that down straight away. Right, then it repeats itself and goes through all of those countries again. The altitude of the habitat of this orchid ranges from 500 meters above sea level in northeastern India to 2,000 meters in the more southerly regions. So you can see what we're getting at here. In the northern areas, territories of its range, it grows nearer the sea. But as it gets closer to the equator, it needs to be higher up. So what can we read into that? It doesn't like to get too hot. It stays in the slightly cooler areas as far as maximum temperature is concerned. That's interpretation. It didn't say that. That's just looking at it logically. Small size, warm to cool growing epiphyte. Yeah, we've already done that on the other site. Bit of description. Blah 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 blah. In the care section, the light level, it says 25,000 to 35,000 lux, which, as I've said, means nothing to me, but I often get asked how somebody can find out the recommended light levels for a particular plant. Well, this site normally gives it if you've got a way of measuring it and you're prepared to accept that these values are valid. Yeah? Where did they come from? Who found that out? Were those readings taken from the plants in the wild or from where somebody grows them? Food for thought. Humidity likes up around 85%, but in the winter less, 70 to 80%. And in the beginning of spring it decreases even further to 55 to 60%. That's that little season that occurs in some places, and it's more common than a lot of people know. You got your wet season and your drier season, which relate to summer and winter, or I'll call it growing season, you know, not so growing season. There's no real expression for that bit. But as you come out of winter, yeah, it starts to get warmer. This normally coincides with the sun moving from one side of the equator back up to the other side. So it's now going from perhaps 11 hours to 13 hours. It's in that transition. Starts to get warmer. But the rainy season hasn't arrived yet. So you get a warmer, drier period at the end of the winter before the rains come. And that's often a trigger for certain plants. That's what fires the blooms off. It's the temperature going up, the light level and the day length slightly increasing, but it hasn't got to the wet season yet. So that's what that really means. Can be grown on mounts, ideally grows on mounts, blah 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 blah. Ensure watering is carried out at least once a day in summer. If it dried out from the day before, don't get them soggy. But if they're on a mount, that's probably true, yeah, even in this country, in the UK. Then it goes into watering. Precipitation is very abundant for 5 months and very low for 5 months, with short transitional periods. Yeah. So there again, it said a dry winter rest, and then it contradicts itself by saying the rain is very low for 5 months of the year. Very low isn't none. Very low is some. So it does get some water. Fertilizer. 1/4 to half doses are recommended. From spring to midsummer you should fertilise enriched with nitrogen, and then until the end of autumn enriched with phosphorus. There is no real need to fiddle around with the content of your fertilisers, but when these things come into growth, the growth is quite rapid. If you can boost the nitrogen during that period along with some calcium, they go together, yeah, it'll do the plant the world of good, and you'll make sure that your canes grow large enough to be classed as mature in the growing season you've got, which in the UK is short. Yeah, so that is useful stuff. Enriched with the phosphorus. The easiest way to have a phosphorus enriched fertilizer is to have one that's just low in nitrogen. Don't really need to increase the phosphogen, just get the balance between it and the nitrogen, which is often roughly the same. In many fertilizers, the N and the K number are very similar. Yeah, all you need to do is drop the nitrogen off a bit. It'll help things mature. And again, you know, if the canes are virtually mature, it's not growing anymore, so what's it going to do with the nitrogen? But most people don't mess around, they just use the same feed year in, and it'll be fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. Fiddling around with different types of fertilizer at different times of year you can do if you choose to, and you might see a bit of difference. Your plants are not going to be twice as big as a consequence, let's put it that way. Right, so that's that lot then. And again, those two sites are available for most species. You get into obscurity, you know, to things that you've never heard of and can't even pronounce. They might not be on the Travaldo one, but they should be on orchid species. But if they're that rare and not common in cultivation at all, you might not get much information because there isn't any. You can't have what there ain't. That's not a proper sentence, I know, but I know what I mean. Yeah, so that's looking at ways of finding some information. It's geared up to species. I haven't done hybrids, but there are other places you can go, like Blue Nanta, that if you put your species name in sorry, your hybrid name in. If it's registered, you'll get the species that went into it, and then you can come back to those sites and look those up individually. And then what you'll have to do, if they don't come up with the same information for both of those species, you'll have to average it. Yeah. And if you've got your hybrid info from Blue Nanta, it'll tell you what the seed parent was, which is normally dominant compared with the pollen parent. Yeah. The seed parent is normally dominant. So if it's got two species in it, and like that's a cool grower and that's a warm grower, somewhere in intermediate is probably going to be right. But if the seed parent was the cool grower, it's going to be at the lower end of intermediate, probably. But that's an interpretation again. So hope there's some tips in there for you, you know, about looking stuff up and trying to read into the words that they use. But I said the magic words for me are cool to warm growing epiphyte. That means it's going to do fine in here. But I did find out something I didn't know, and that was the fact that ignea is a terrestrial. That changes the need to, brings up the urgency to repot that, because it's not happy at the moment. And part of that's the heat. But I don't think it's happy in that media. Now that was the live sphagnum that gets very compact very quickly. Now, in theory, if it's a terrestrial, it should be okay with that. It could just be breaking down. Perhaps it's the stuff I collected wild. It just might not last long. I don't know. But we'll have to redo that. So there we go. And thanks for all those that have recently subscribed. I think we're down to about 30 to go now. That's not many. We could hit that 10k by the end of next week. Oh boy. And then I'll have to work out the complexities and ins and outs of the giveaway, which I will need a little bit of time to think about. I mean, I've got a rough idea what I'm going to do. I'll have to do a video saying what it is with the rules and all that sort of stuff. So that won't be immediate. I'll wait till we've gone past the 10k and it's safe. It's no good doing it when it's 10,001, because that one and their mate might decide to unsubscribe the next day. Does happen. So thanks for those who've recently done that, and for all those that have done it in the past and stayed with the channel. Some people I'm sure are still with this channel right from the beginning till now. I was lucky because I didn't bribe, but I semi-bullied a few of the top channels to actually give me a shout out. I've just started a channel. Can you come and have a look and see what you think and say what you think? So you get a couple of the bigger ones. And I've always said, when you're starting your channel, part of your work, if you want your channel to grow, is to get known. How do you get known? You make comments on other people's channel, and hopefully those comments occasionally start a little conversation. Suddenly people notice your name, and all they've got to do is click on your name and they go to your channel. Yeah. So there are ways of getting people to come and have a look at your channel. It still needs reasonable content, and people still need to feel comfortable there, otherwise they won't stay. So you still got to do some work, and hopefully my work with the new microphone is now okay, and people are happy with my new intro. I've balanced the music and the sound volume now. It should be nice and even, so you haven't got to leap out your chair for your volume control and then go and get comfortable again, and then have to get up and turn it up again because the voice is too quiet. Hopefully I've sorted that now, so it should be good. Anyway, that's the Sunday chat done, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.